All right. How's everybody doing out there? Thanks for showing up. This is our first Energy Law Lecture Series event for this school year, for this semester, and this is going to be a great way to start. So I appreciate everyone in the auditorium being here with us today. I'd like to welcome everybody who's joining us by Zoom. And like Dean Chapman was just asking or alerting you to, she has uploaded the course number to get CLE credit with the State Bar of Texas, for those of you who need that. So be sure and pay attention to that as well. And I also want to alert my students in Oil and Gas Law 1, if you haven't signed in already, be sure you come down to this row, that's the third row back, where there's a sign-in sheet, and make sure that I know that you were here, because that's the only way you're going to get credit for it, is if you sign in on that sheet. So don't forget to do that if you haven't already done it. Okay, well, let me tell you a little bit about the plans for this fall before I introduce our guest speaker for today. We have two more Energy Law Lecture Series events that'll occur in October and November. The next one will be on Monday, October 13th, and the speaker will be Charles Weller. And Mr. Weller is the general counsel for an organization called the CO2 Coalition. In the meantime, if you're interested about that organization, you can Google them and look at their website. It's pretty impressive. But the CO2 Coalition, and Mr. Weller is their in-house counsel, and he'll be down here. And I think he's going to talk about something that's topical at the moment, the EPA's reconsideration of carbon dioxide as a pollutant. So that might be an interesting one for y'all to make sure you have on your calendar as well. And then our final event for the fall will be on Monday, November 3rd, and our speaker that day will be Shane Walker. And Shane's local here. He's the executive director of something called the Texas Produced Water Consortium, which the Texas legislature created a few years ago for the express purpose of accelerating research and development on how to make produced water, which is what comes up with oil and gas, and typically just gets disposed of back down hole, how to clean it up economically so it can be reused for beneficial purposes like agriculture and other applications. So a big deal, because we have an endless supply of produced water. If we could figure out a way to make beneficial use out of it economically, it could solve a whole lot of problems. So that's what the Produced Water Consortium has been tasked with doing, and Shane Walker is in charge of it. So he'll be our speaker wrapping up the fall on Monday, November 3rd. All right, well, let me introduce our speaker for today, who is it's just a great joy to have him with us. He's a busy guy, and he has to cover the state pretty much every day and every week, so that he had time to come to Lubbock and spend the next hour with us is really appreciated. His name is Jim Wright. He's one of our 3 Texas Railroad Commissioners, and for those of you who don't know, the Railroad Commission is the state agency that regulates the oil and gas industry. And we have 3 elected positions there. They have staggered 6-year terms, so someone's always up for election every 2 years. Just so happens that Commissioner Wright will be up for re-election next November. So he's currently the chairman of the 3-commissioner panel of the Railroad Commission. And so let me tell you a little bit about him. He's a lifelong South Texan and a 5th-generation rancher. He began his career in the energy sector at the age of 19 and built environmental management companies that serve the energy industry. He was first elected to the Railroad Commission in November 2020. He has emphasized the importance of maintaining a fair and consistent regulatory environment that encourages innovation. He has or believes that the long-term success of the Texas economy is closely linked to the vitality of its energy sector, and that expanding access to global energy markets is crucial for preserving Texas's status as an energy and economic powerhouse. He advocates for proactive regulatory approaches to emerging issues such as water and carbon management, and he supports the responsible development of technologies like geothermal power and hydrogen production and storage. His title of his lecture today is Uniquely Texan: How Energy Abundance, Regulatory Certainty, and Innovation Have Led to American Energy Independence. It's a great privilege and honor and joy to have with us today Chairman of the Railroad Commission, Jim Wright.
Appreciate it. Hello, everyone. You know, it's always exciting for me to come to colleges and speak. I think that unique opportunity that you guys have by having the ability to even go to college and become part of our future here in Texas is so strongly important. I cannot tell you the honor that I have to be invited to come here and do this. I get asked every now and then to go to different colleges and talk about things we do at the Railroad Commission. But I have to say this, my daughter went to school here and she graduated here and my money was spent here. So I'm kind of biased when it comes to the Red Raiders. So just wanted to give you guys that secret. So let's talk about the Railroad Commission. Kind of a funny name for a guy that has nothing to do with railroads, right? Well, how did the Railroad Commission start? I think it's important that everybody understands what the history was. Our agency is the oldest agency existing in Texas today. We started the agency in 1891. Why was it started? It was started because railroads were the only form of transportation that could get commodities to market supposedly at a cheaper rate. So if you were making horseshoes, for example, back then, and you were selling 10 or 20 of those horseshoes in the town that you happened to be living in because you couldn't distribute that product to other places, railroads provided that opportunity for you. So instead of making, I'm just using numbers, $10 a month in profit on those horseshoes, by exposing you to other markets, you could actually make $100 a month in profit. So what began to happen is the railroad magnates started realizing that they were shipping commodities where people were making what they felt like was a lot of money. So they started looking at how much of that money can we take because they have to have us to get those products to those markets, right? So they started more or less price gouging. So in other words, you making more money, they wanted their majority of that profit. That's why the Railroad Commission was originally created. It was created so that there could be a regulatory authority by the government, by the state of Texas, which set tariff rates on what those railroads could actually charge some poor guy that's trying to create horseshoes and get them to another market. What happened to Texas whenever we turned into the early 1900s, 1910, 1920? Anybody know what happened to Texas back then? I know we had a lot of cattle. We had a lot of farming, which was kind of what Texas is most commonly famous for. But we discovered one other thing. We discovered oil. Texas actually is a state that's, out of all the other 50 states in this nation, is blessed with a very abundancy of oil and gas. So naturally, what happened? We discovered oil. It was great. The guy was standing there going, hey, I discovered oil, and I know that there's a need for oil because combustion engines were starting to come alive. People using it as fuels and other additives that they needed to make other products as technology was evolving. But the problem with that was, how do we get it where it's needed? How do we get it to those refineries to turn it into products? Actually, the best way of moving that product, and it still exists today, was pipeline. So naturally, another commodity, having to move to where it's needed in the market, they came to the Railroad Commission and said, you guys are regulating and doing the tariffs for the railroads. We need you now to do tariffs for the pipelines. That's what started our role, actually, in regulating the oil and gas industry. And that evolved from there. That evolved into saying, oil and gas is one of our natural resources here in the state of Texas. We have other natural resources too. We have uranium and we have coal. Let's get the Railroad Commission to do that also. So today we regulate uranium and coal, besides all of the pipelines. They said, well, those pipelines are also taking natural gas to homes throughout developing cities and throughout the cities that we have today. And that gas gets distributed to your home. You burn it in your stoves or you burn it for heat. We regulate what those rates are that people can charge you for that. So I'm telling you this background because I think it's going to be important for you to understand as I move through this of why I think it's such a great field for you guys to be looking at as your future. Just by a show of hands, how many people in here are really wanting to be on the law side of things for oil and gas? Just about every one of you that I can see. So again, I think it's important that out of today, what I have to tell you is what does the future look like for you guys? And I can tell you the future is bright because what we're doing in Texas today is basically kind of a miracle. Texas, just for those of you that may not know, when we developed oil and gas, we did what was called conventional drilling. We did vertical wells, which meant simply this. We would go out and we, through geology research, would find a pool of oil. We'd drill down into that pool and we'd extract that oil out of that pool. And that's the way we managed it. Here came the early 80s, late 70s, and a lot of those pools were drying up throughout Texas. You guys don't remember, but I remember when I got my driver's license, the speed limit changed from where it used to be 70, 75 miles an hour on the average. They mandated that everybody cannot exceed 55 miles an hour because we felt like in the United States we were running out of oil. So we went quite a few years before, it was specifically until 2008, just thinking that, the United States did not have a lot of oil to offer on the world market stage. We were actually a huge importer of crude oil. That's how the United States was surviving, by importing oil from places like Saudi Arabia, Russia even. Around 2008, technology as it advanced showed that we were missing a lot of the stuff underground, under the surface. Technology showed that we could actually go down and instead of drilling straight into the ground, we could drill down and make that pipe turn and go horizontal and go through a formation that we actually thought there was no way of extracting that resource from because it was so tight. It was such a tight rock that just drilling straight down into it weren't getting much return. But when we drilled down and started going horizontal and we added what was called fracking to that, and I know most of you know what fracking is. You see it every day practically. But fracking was a way of setting off charges so that we could kind of crack that formation so that we could get oil to flow up to the surface. When 2008, we call it the revolution. We call it the shale discovery because that's literally what we're kind of drilling into today is the shale discovery. What happened? We started producing a lot more oil. It got attention of our federal government because back then, whenever we thought we didn't have enough oil in the United States for us to be sustained, we put in laws that said we could not export any of our oil for market. 2008, with the discovery of the shale, it took us another, what was it, Bill? 8 years before we felt confident enough that we had enough oil in the United States to actually start competing on the world market stage. And if you follow what I'm kind of telling you guys, I think you'll follow all of the things that come along with how fast you move, what new technology is, developing new markets. I mean, the amount of paperwork that comes through regulatory agencies such as mine, or the amount of paperwork that you have discrepancies in, I can't tell you the immense amount of court battles that have happened in that type of development. Those old mineral leases back when they were vertical wells said one thing, and producers naturally wanted to piggyback on those old mineral leases to doing horizontal drilling. The people that were mineral holders that had split off into bigger families actually wanted more income, so there was some discrepancy in that as we discovered the shale side of things. But whenever we did discover the shale, in 2016, our federal government said, you know what, we think we can compete because we think we have now an abundance of oil and gas. So in 2016, we lifted the embargo. we were allowed to start shipping our product worldwide. And you think about it, I'm an older guy. I'm a little older than you guys, not much. But in 2016, we really didn't know what being exposed to the world market meant for us. And then today, just to kind of give you an idea of just Texas alone, today Texas produces 6 million barrels of oil every day. Not at 6 million barrels. Today, Texas produces about 34 billion cubic feet of natural gas every day. Today, Texas exports about 4 million of those barrels to markets other than our domestic markets. Today, we export over 20 billion cubic feet of liquefied natural gas to other markets. So today, Texas is actually considered the fourth largest producer in the entire world. We're now competing with people like Saudi Arabia and Russia and others, Venezuela. So we're still developing, we're still moving, we're still trying to find more markets. That's the reason I think that you guys' future is really, really bright. I've got some notes that I'd like to just give you some facts on, just so you guys know of what that really meant for Texas. And I probably know them by memory. But in 2024, oil and gas revenue and everything that was ancillary to oil and gas was about 38% of our gross domestic product here in Texas. I think it was just a little bit south of $400 billion, if my numbers are correct, of what oil and gas attributed for Texas. So when you think about future and you think about the reserves, you think about where technology is going and making sure that we're finding oil, that we're not wasting that oil or gas, and that we're bringing it to the surface, that technology is changing every day. I don't see this future going away for a long time. And I everywhere I go, I get people that say, fossil fuel is not good for our environment. We need to do away with fossil fuel. I don't know how many people really realize everything you're touching right now, the clothes you're wearing on your back, has some form of oil or gas in it. Your cell phone, your computer. And again, anything that you've got polyester that's on, anything but cotton is pretty much made from oil and gas. So I don't see that we have a future without oil and gas unless, I don't even know, we want to live like cavemen, maybe we could do without oil and gas, but it'd be tough. So everywhere I go and I listen to that, I try to explain to people that the future for us in oil and gas is going to be here for a long time. I think technology is going to continue to change. I think we're going to continue to make great discoveries. One of the things that we face today in our agency is, and you've heard about it in the media, is we've drilled a lot of oil and gas wells in Texas, to the tune of just south of 300,000 wells. Out of those, about 175,000 of them are actually producing today, generating something. The rest of those are sitting idle. So you hear people talk about orphan wells. There's a difference between an idle well and an orphan well. An orphan well is actually a well that a guy, the company, whatever, went bankrupt. And there's nobody else out there responsible for that well. So our agency literally has to come take those wells over and plug those and manage those correctly. But out of all the other wells, those are still sitting idle. They're still owned by somebody. And the reason you don't see those being plugged, is naturally you would think if a well's depleted, then let's go plug it. Because technology is always changing. Just here in the past 6 months, we've had technology that have come out and said, out of all those old wells, you can go down and actually, I'm trying to think of the name of it, but it's like sponging. It's an automated sponging process to where you can drag more oil out of those wells. And to me, to go plug something, to ruin something that we have a natural resource in, is not good for us. If we're going to go after that resource, we need to make sure we're utilizing it all we can. So I think as we look forward in the future, some of these idle wells are going to mean something for Texas. as they are starting to show today. The other thing that we generate with oil and gas, that some of the issues that we're having, what comes out of the ground with crude oil besides oil and gas? Does anybody know? Water, right? A lot of water. A lot of water that's high in salinity because it's coming from way beneath the earth. Today we're producing, like I told you earlier, right around 6 million barrels a day. For every 1 barrel of crude oil that we produce about 4 barrels of that water. So just in Texas alone, we're handling 24 million barrels of water. That has caused issues, and you've probably seen it. You've heard about seismicity, and excuse me, because if I keep talking, I won't be able to without taking a drink. You've probably heard about it, and you've seen it, where there's been a large increase in earthquakes in our West Texas area, what we call the Permian and the Delaware Play. Those earthquakes, I guarantee you, there's some of them happening today. They're just very low in magnitude, but there are days where they get higher in magnitude. Our biggest earthquake, I think, that we have recorded right now out of the Permian and Delaware is about 5.5 in size, which is a pretty big earthquake. So we've started noticing that everywhere that we have oil and gas production, and we have a lot of water that we have to deal with in the new shale revolution, we've seen this happen. We've seen it happen in other places throughout the state of Texas. In the old days, you never heard about that. And I can tell you why. Remember me telling you in the old days, we had just a straight pipe going down in the ground. It pooled out of a pool of water. Same thing there. Gas came with it and water came with it, except that water was returned pretty much in the same geological formation from where it came. Today, in the shale revolution, and what we're trying to drill into is such a really tight formation that there's too much pressure to return that water from where it came. So we've got to find other areas to put water safely, which is injection into the ground, either above or below that formation. And I always tell people, earthquakes are kind of caused by this. If you're drinking out of a 12-ounce can and you're trying to put 20 ounces in it, it doesn't work out real good. So today we have that issue. We have overpressurization that's being caused from what we've seen in data below that producing formation, what we call a deep strata zone, where that pressure is starting causing shift in the, God, I'm brain dead. In the faults, right? So what we've decided at the commission is can't do that. Can't allow these size of magnitude of earthquakes to occur. Let's go back and start injecting in shallower zones. What did I tell you earlier? From the 1920s onwards or so, we have a lot of pipes sticking in the ground. How many did I tell you? 175,000 of them? Probably 125,000 of those are old straight pipes that are in shallower zones. So as pressure builds with all that magnitude of water, where does water go? Where does it always search for? The path of least resistance. So today that's a problem for us too. What we started doing over the past 3 years is looking at how can we take that magnitude of water and turn it into a resource. You see, you're in Lubbock, so you may be a little bit. Are you west of the 98th meridian here? So you don't get a whole lot of rain in comparison to Houston, Texas, right? I can tell you in Midland and Odessa, and where I'm from, a little town called Orange Grove, which is in South Texas, I don't know what rain is anymore. I don't see rain anymore. So I think that produced water, that volume of produced water, given where technology is today and the economics of treating that water, is a potential source for us, not just in irrigation, but also in recharging of surface water sources. This is new. And the reason I want to make sure that you're aware of this is when you graduate out of here, this is probably a lot of the area that you're going to be faced with. This is a lot of things you're going to be dealing with as we move through the future. We talked about challenges, and we talked about kind of the history of what the Railroad Commission has been. let's talk about some of the other issues that you see, because anything that happens bad, especially with my agency or the industries that I regulate, seems to always make that in the media. Anything that's good never gets in the media. So we'll talk about the other issues such as flaring. Everybody's heard about flaring and its intensity and what it's doing in greenhouse gas emissions. Does everybody know what carbon sequestration is? Do you teach that in your class?
I don't know about this crowd if they all know about it.
Okay. Greenhouse gas emissions, whenever it's compared to what flaring is, when you burn natural gas, it creates carbon. Pretty much when you burn anything, it creates carbon and oxygen. Kind of what makes our planet what it is. Without carbon, we wouldn't have any plants, we wouldn't have any trees. But with what we're doing today, a lot of scientists are saying that we're putting too much carbon in the atmosphere, that it's causing shifts in what our weather patterns are. I don't know if they're true or not, but they've certainly caught the attention of our federal government. So our federal government decided, how do we get industry, oil and gas industry, refineries, vehicles, everybody to stop emitting gases into our atmosphere? And the only way to do that, listen to what I'm fixing to tell you because it's going to be a big part of your future, is we have to entice them. So let's develop a tax credit. Let's call this tax credit, today it's referred to, and maybe you've been taught this, maybe you haven't, a 45Q tax credit. If you haven't been taught that, you need to go to a professor here and ask him to teach it to you. Because what that 45Q tax credit does is it says, look, if you go out and you're responsible and you start mitigating those greenhouse gas emissions and you're starting to remove those from our atmosphere, for every ton that you're removing, we're going to allow you to take a credit on the profit of the corporation that's doing that. That's kind of a real simple way of explaining it in a very complicated field. I'll let you explain the complication to them. But under the 45Q tax credit, it's an initiative for that company to start mitigating those greenhouse gas emissions. Not only did they say that, they said for every ton you have, for companies that don't want to go out and be responsible in their greenhouse gas emissions, we'll create a market and we'll refer to that as a carbon credit market. And that idea and that philosophy, just to give you an example of what that is, started about 40 years ago. It started in our European countries. And what they saw is they saw merchant ships and cruise ships coming in. You kids are probably too young to remember, but back when I was a kid, if you saw a ship out on the water, it was pouring black smoke out of it like mad. It was actually burning an off-spec type oil. That's what created the fuel for most of those ships. The emissions that came out of them were horrific. So Europe countries said, look, before you can dock in our country, you're going to have to do something before we allow you to do that. If you're going to be emitting all that stuff into our atmosphere, we want you to buy carbon credits. We want you to pay some estimated amount on the tonnage of what you're putting off in our atmosphere. That started almost 40 years ago. Today, there are a lot of carbon credit markets, registries, to where you can do this sort of the same thing. Because there's a lot of manufacturing today, especially in the refinery side, that although they're doing a good job at mitigating what releases they have, there's just no technology more available to mitigate it further. So I started this conversation about flaring. And we're, like I told you earlier, we're producing about 34 billion cubic feet of natural gas a day. But when you drill a well, it's kind of a risk, a little bit. You may have a well that's going to last a while, and you may have a well that's only going to last a few days. So putting the infrastructure to that well to take away gas, water, and oil is something that's really high risk. It's a lot of capital that you have to invest. Usually at our agency, we allow you 10 days to make kind of the decision on whether that well is going to be something that you're going to continue to perform, or you're going to back out of it. So we'll allow you to flare off that gas for the first 10 days. If you want to flare further than that, you now have to come to our agency and you have to tell us when you're going to be connected. You have to do it within a certain time limit so that we are not putting off or burning or flaring into the atmosphere. Back 2020, our percentage of flaring was for every ton of or cubic foot of natural gas that we created was about 6 or 7% of volume that was being flared. Since we've changed and we've recognized the issue in greenhouse gas emissions, I'm glad to say that we've tripled the amount of production. We're now down to less than 0.5%. So by looking at what the future is, by listening to what the concerns are, you'll be able to dictate what your future is going to look like. Okay on time? You'll be able to kind of predict what your future is going to look like. That's I can't say enough of how excited I am that you've chosen this path. How excited I am that you're decided to be in Texas and the opportunities that the oil and gas industry brings for each and every one of you. It's amazing. I know whenever I decided to do what I do, which I own an environmental service companies, a couple of them, and we mainly go around and mitigate environmental concerns for different people. That was when I was 31 years old when I started my own company. You know, I recognized the opportunities that were out there, and I can't tell you it's exciting, especially when you look at being in the law side of things and the speakers and coming to hear people like me speak today that's been there, boots on the ground, and experienced a lot of this. What I came to politics for is because I did not like the way that things were progressing, especially at my agency. I refer to it today as my agency because now I'm the chairman. What I didn't like about my agency is I didn't think we were adapting and listening to people's concerns as much as we should have been. I will say that we just changed our environmental rules, came to effect June of this year, where things have gotten a little better. We've heard people's concerns. We've heard the industry's concerns. But more than that, when you have a regulatory agency that's setting rules out, those rules need to be concise and consistent. Nothing kills industry worse than inconsistency. I know you guys have saw through the Biden administration, which I'm not condemning that at all. But there was a lot of changes made in the Biden administration, a lot of inconsistencies that were being made in the Biden administration. Then we had an administrative change. Now, today we have President Trump. It's kind of like the pendulum swung all the other way. And today we've still got a lot of inconsistency in what our regulatory structure is going to look like. I was just asking the other day about some federal funding that was available for our orphan well program, because during the Biden administration, when that program was started under the Infrastructure and Investment and Jobs Act, they said, okay, every state that has oil and gas and has orphan wells, you guys can have 25 million, no strings attached. Just go plug wells. We took that 25 million here in the state of Texas. We plugged 730 wells with it. I said, okay, here's the next tranche. But we're going to do this based on how many orphan wells each state has. Of course, Texas has a lot of orphan wells. Although our own legislation provides millions and millions of dollars for us every year to mitigate those, it seems like the more that we plug, the more we inherit, because we have a huge backlog of idle wells. Idle wells, a lot of companies can't sit there and hold on to that asset forever. They end up going bankrupt, which throws them into the orphan well category, as I explained earlier. But the federal government said during the Biden administration that we qualified for an additional $90 million. In fact, we could qualify for up to $318 million of federal funds. The only problem with that is, we want you to go out and we're going to want you to do a real investigation on whether you're damaging anything under the National Historical Preservation Act. The other thing we're going to want you to do is we're going to want you to do a study to make sure that that plugging action is not doing anything to any type of endangered species. That's where the kind of the brakes were put on at that point, because to go and plug a well under that kind of red tape added about another $15,000 per well to do those two functions. I went to Washington myself. I sat down and I argued. I was in front of a committee that I didn't want to be in front of, but I think we drove the ball home. It was not just Texas. There was other states there with me. Those states, including California, that said, this is ridiculous. And I'm sitting there kind of being hesitant because I'm wondering if the light's going on in anybody's head here. When you have that kind of red tape and you have an oil and gas site, at one day, that site was disturbed. You just don't go out and put a hole in the ground. You take bulldozers out and you clear out a space to put all the supporting equipment. So at one time, that space was disturbed. If there was anything that was there, like a spoon a Neanderthal may have used 100 million years ago, it's gone now. And if that well is a potential source of methane emission or potential source to be leaking contaminated water or gas, what protects that endangered species more than plugging the well? That was my argument to them. So, of course, it wasn't heard very well during the Biden administration. So I got angry enough to go write an op-ed. I put it in the Washington Times. I said, this is the way that program should apply. Because our goal here is to stop methane emissions. Our goal here is not to endanger any species. The National Historic Preservation Act, there's nothing I could have done about that because those sites were already disturbed. But the main goal is to plug the wells. If that is your interest, is to protect what those concerns are. I wrote that in the op-ed, and I'm proud to say about 4 months ago, our new Secretary of Interior, Doug Burgum, I think he took that op-ed that I had in the Washington Times and he overlaid it on his letterhead and sent it out to all the states saying we no longer have to do that. So now we have access to even more money to go out and plug these wells. Our own legislation this year during our legislative process recognized that we needed more money to do this, starting to recognize that this is a concern. This is something that everybody has on their mind. We got an additional $100 million added to our budget. So I'm proud to say that that area is going to be moving. But never forget this, guys. The pendulum on politics always swings. As you heard the professor say earlier, I'm up for election here in November 2026. Who knows if I get reelected or not? But if I don't, what comes in to replace me? That's what makes that pendulum on politics swing. So you never know. I mean, it's a challenging time as we move forward through the future. When you come in and you want to run for politics, especially to be at a regulatory agency like mine, you understand what really makes, why are we there, and hopefully I've done a little bit of a job explaining that. But when you look at what our mission statement is at the Railroad Commission, number one is safety for everybody in Texas. Number two, it's making sure that we're protecting our environment. Here's number three, and I know you guys are smart, you wouldn't be here in this law program. We also have to ensure the economic vitality of the industries we regulate. I understand 1 and 2, as I know you do too. Safety, environment, of course we're concerned about that. But how does 1 and 2 even begin to rhyme with number 3? Whenever we've got to ensure the economic vitality of those industries that we regulate. So this job of being a regulator, which by the way, I'm one of the few agencies that you're going to go elect. Most of our agencies in Texas are appointed. They don't go through an election process. So it's very important to know why railroad commissioners are elected. That's the 3 points that I want to bring up. It would be very difficult for somebody under an appointment type status to make sure that they could accommodate those 3 things. So it is my job every day to listen to every side, to listen to people outside the industry and to listen to people inside the industry and to balance what that is. It's not easy. And God bless you if you want to pick politics to go into, because that's not easy either. But I do think that I'm very proud to see just the turnout here today. And again, in the path that you're choosing to move forward in your futures, it's amazing. I've been in it all my life. It never stops changing. And change always brings issues. I can guarantee you that you're always going to be in front of an agency like mine arguing a case, or you're going to be in a more court setting arguing a case if you choose the path of something to do with oil and gas. So I'm going to tell you, I'm a real simple guy. I don't bite. But what I do love is I love to be asked questions, especially whenever I talk and confuse the hell out of people. So I'm gonna pause because I think I've got another 10 minutes. 10 minutes. And I want to make sure that I'm addressing any of you guys' concerns. And whatever that question may be, there's never a dumb question. So please ask me anything you want to ask. And I want to say that, again, it was a high honor for me to be here today. I mean, to sit in front of you guys and have a conversation and get you to understand a little bit of what I do, I think is very important. So I'm going to close with that. But I do want to show somebody to raise their hand, and let's try to open a little bit of dialogue in what few minutes we have left, if you don't mind. Yes, sir.
And use your desk mic there.
Sir, I've got a question about orphan wells. And I don't know how many of these orphan wells can be, reworked. I know there's probably some that might just need an acid job or need some electrical hardware. It's probably most of them, it's more difficult than that. But what does the Railroad Commission do to incentivize operators to take a look at these orphan wells that can be reworked and, they have to get a lease and everything, but to take them from the commission and rework them? What does the commission do about that?
Yeah. That's a great question. And we have people that call about those all the time. And as far as the commission is concerned, if you can meet our criteria of bonding and the other things that we require, we welcome you to come in and take those. Of course, you have the flip side of that where you've got to deal with the mineral holder and the surface tenant or surface owner before that too. But yeah, great question. And we're getting a lot of that even in the space of what we call geothermal today, because a lot of those old vertical wells are in hotter water. The end of that pipe ends up in hotter water, which is part of the geothermal process. For you guys that may not be familiar, remember back, you read in your history books that we used to operate things off of steam and water. Well, that's basically the same principle as geothermal. It's a source of steam so that we could run engines to manufacturing process. Thank you for that question. Hope that answered it. Come on, there you go.
Again, regarding the orphan wells, I was curious if there was ever any exploration as to whether there's a process to shift the liability onto the companies before they go bankrupt in order to force them to maybe keep cash on hand in anticipation of having to cap the wells, and if that was ever considered or...
I was praying that somebody was going to ask that question. You remember me talking about the three things I'm responsible for: safety, environment, and the economic vitality of the industries we regulate. I don't set the bonding requirements. The bonding requirements today for a well, if you own 1 to 10 wells, it's a $25,000 bond. If you own 10 to 50 wells, it's a $100,000 bond. If you own, I think my numbers are right, over 50 wells, the max you're going to put up in bonding is $250,000. Each one of the wells today cost me roughly $33,000 to plug. Doesn't make sense, does it? No. That's what you would have to meet if you were wanting to get into the business. But why doesn't it make sense? Legislation decided that who is the biggest risk takers when it goes to starting a business? Who do you think the biggest risk takers are? Would it be a guy that goes out and says, I think I can discover oil there? And he puts an $8 million investment into a horizontal drilling program to drill one hole? That's why those bonds are so less, because it takes a special type of person to go out and take that risk, to put that kind of capital into something that may not return a dime. So it's a balancing act, right? Remember I explained it to you. That's the reason I love that question. It's you know, it makes no sense at first when you say, cost you $33,000. Won't you make everybody bond every well for $33,000? Because it would keep a lot of people out of the opportunity to go, for those entrepreneurs that are risk takers, to get into the oil and gas business. Oil and gas business last year returned about $27 billion in tax revenue for the state of Texas. That's why it's set up the way it is. Somebody else had their hand up. Yes, sir.
Will the Railroad Commission take a greater role in regulating produced water following the Cactus decision that just came down?
That's why I love these guys, because they know what they're talking about. I'm telling you, every time I talk to college students like yourselves, y'all asked far more intelligent questions than grown-ups that have been in this industry for 40 years. So thanks for that question. Yeah, the Cactus decision, and does everybody know what the Cactus? Did you study about this at all? Does everybody in here know what that is? It was ownership, you know, of actually who owns that water. Was it the surface owner or was it the producer? Correct me if I'm wrong in all this. Today it's determined through the Cactus decision, which went to the Supreme Court, that it's actually the surface owner that owns that water. What does that do whenever we're trying to recycle that water? It now brings that surface owner in as part of being liable for something that may happen if it's not treated and not used correctly, which is a good ruling for us. So that it's also, so you know, Texas legislation passed a bill this year that followed that same decision. Anyone else? Am I good on time?
You're good on time. You have any closing remarks?
Somebody
got one back there. Yep.
Yes, sir.
My name is Daniel. I actually worked at the Railroad Commission this summer with Alex, Scott, and all them. If anyone's interested in working for the Railroad Commission, it was honestly my favorite internship. You learn a lot from there, and it's real practical, and it's not just oil and gas. I had a case about helium facilities. It's a lot of interesting things that you learn about it, and it's really great practice.
Now, there's other things that we do regulate, and you're aware of them, and thank you for coming. I encourage everybody. I think that's a great place to go to get that experience. We're always hiring interns at the agency. If any of you are interested in that, please reach out to my office. Love to help you every way I can. We have hydrogen today too that we're also responsible for. Hydrogen's kind of a new area for us. Do I see the future of hydrogen being great? Personally, I'm not really convinced that's a great thing, because we've talked about hydrogen since I was this tall. And it's never really gone anywhere. I was asking a guy the other day about hydrogen. I said, if I were to buy a car that runs on hydrogen and compare that to the price of gasoline, and I was buying hydrogen for it, what would it cost me in a gallon of hydrogen versus a gallon of gasoline? The answer to that was $8 a gallon. So until that gets a little bit better, I'm not real sure that that's going to happen. That's mainly was focused on because of the IIJA, what we called the IRA bill, which was the
Inflation Reduction Act.
Inflation Reduction Act, set up by the Biden administration, which was another taxing credit type situation where we could start to be less dependent on oil and gas. Like I told you earlier, I've thought about that. I think about that in my sleep. I don't know how we're ever going to wean ourselves off oil and gas, but I do think there's a way with people, young people like you, for our future, that we can make it safer for use and we can make it more efficient.
Let's thank Jim Wright for being with us today.
Thank you, guys.